Welcome back to my story. I wish you a good day. If you find it interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any interesting stories. Now let's start the story. I've always been a guy who plays by the rules, pays my bills on time, keeps my yard neat, and tries to get along with my neighbors. My name's Nathan, and after 12 years working as a software developer, I finally saved enough to buy my dream property. A stunning 1.5-acre lot in the upscale Oak Ridge Estates in Charlotte, North Carolina. The land came with a view of the rolling hills, a small creek running through the back, and enough space for me to build the home I'd always wanted. Sure, the Homeowners Association, HOA, had a long list of rules, but the real estate agent swore it was just standard stuff to keep the neighborhood looking sharp. I went through the covenant with a fine-tooth comb, didn't see anything alarming, and signed the papers. For the first year, everything was a dream come true. I built my modern home, added a sleek garden with native plants, and even installed a smart irrigation system that the HOA board approved after I showed it wouldn't mess with the neighborhood's vibe. I paid my dues on time, showed up to the occasional HOA meeting, and kept my place in tip-top shape. My neighbors were friendly enough, though most of them kept their distance like people with big houses and bigger egos often do. Then everything flipped upside down when Caroline Baxter got elected as the new HOA president. Caroline had only moved into Oak Ridge Estates 8 months earlier, but she'd campaigned hard, promising to turn our neighborhood into the crown jewel of Charlotte. I didn't think much of it until her first meeting as president when she rolled out her big community unity plan. Oak Ridge Estates shouldn't just be a bunch of fancy houses, she declared, her voice ringing with the kind of confidence that makes you either love her or dread her. It should be a real community, shared spaces, amenities, a place where we all connect. It sounded nice. I'll give her that. But then she pulled up a map on the projector, and my heart sank. Right there, highlighted in bright red, was my property, specifically the half-acre around my creek and the wooded area I'd turned into a private retreat. Caroline called it Phase 1, Community Serenity Zone. When the floor opened for questions, I shot my hand up. Excuse me, but that's my private land you're marking as shared space. I never agreed to this, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Caroline flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nathan, if you'll refer to Section 14, subsection B of the covenant, the HOA has the right to designate certain areas as shared spaces for community benefit, with fair compensation for affected owners. I was floored. I'd read that covenant front to back. How had I missed this? What kind of compensation are we talking about? I asked, my stomach twisting. The board is offering a 15% reduction in your annual dues, she said smoothly, which is generous considering how this will boost your property value. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Boost my property value? You're talking about strangers walking through my backyard, hanging out by my creek. That's a huge privacy issue. Caroline's smile tightened. The area will only be accessible to Oak Ridge residents during daylight hours, and we'll put up signs and pathways to ensure everyone respects the boundaries. A few neighbors nodded along, clearly buying into her shiny vision. I scanned the room for support, but most people whose land wasn't on the chopping block looked unbothered, or worse, excited. Only a couple of others whose properties were marked seemed uneasy, but they stayed quiet. I need to talk to my lawyer about this, I said finally, my voice tight. Of course, Carolyn replied, her tone dripping with fake kindness. We'll move forward with preliminary plans in the meantime. The vote is set for next month. I left that meeting in a haze, covenant in hand, already dialing my attorney, Jenna. This couldn't be legal, could it? Turns out it was, sort of. Jenna didn't sugarcoat it. The provision is there, buried in legalese so dense you'd need a law degree to catch it, she said. But they do have to offer fair compensation. A 15% dues reduction for half an acre of your land, that's a joke. So I can't stop them? I asked, feeling the ground slip out from under me. Not exactly, Jenna said, a spark in her voice. The covenant says they can designate areas, but any changes have to comply with local zoning laws, safety regulations, and property codes. That gives us some wiggle room. Over the next few weeks, I watched in disbelief as the HOA started moving fast. Little orange flags popped up along the edge of my property, marking the proposed pathway. A surveyor showed up one afternoon, claiming the HOA had hired him to measure boundaries. I sent him packing. Then I got a fancy letter outlining the Community Serenity Zone timeline. Fence removal, path installation, and picnic tables, all kicking off right after the vote. They weren't just planning. They were acting like the vote was just a formality. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when I got home from work and found Caroline standing in my backyard with 2 HOA board members, pointing at my creek like they already owned it. "We're thinking a small bridge here," she said, gesturing toward the eastern bank. "Maybe some benches over there. It'll be a perfect spot for residents to unwind." I felt my blood boil as I marched over. "You're trespassing on my property," I said, my voice low but firm. "All of you need to leave. Now." Caroline didn't even blink. "Oh, Nathan, there's no need to get upset," she said, her tone suggesting I was overreacting. "As HOA board members, we have the right to inspect areas for community planning. Show me where the covenant says you can come onto my land without permission," I snapped. "Because unless you've got that in writing, you're trespassing and I'll call the sheriff." The 2 board members shifted uncomfortably, but Caroline just sighed, like I was a kid throwing a tantrum. "Fine," she said. "We'll schedule an official inspection with notice. But this attitude isn't helping anyone, Nathan. The Community Unity Plan will go forward, with or without your cooperation." They left, but I could feel the fury burning in my chest. That night, I barely slept. The entitlement, the audacity of these people to just decide my land was theirs. It was maddening. But I knew anger wouldn't fix this. I needed a plan. The next morning, I called Jenna with a new idea. "I want to put up a security wall around my property. Something high-tech, legal, and impossible for them to bypass," I said. Jenna paused, then said, "The covenant allows for security measures, but they'd probably deny your application under these circumstances. But there's another option, tech zoning exemptions." "Tech zoning?" I asked, confused. "My land isn't a tech hub." "It doesn't have to be," she explained. "In North Carolina, properties used for tech research, like smart home testing or IoT development, can qualify for special zoning protections. That includes the right to install advanced security systems to protect your research assets. You're a software developer, right? This could work." It was the loophole I'd been waiting for. Over the next week, I filed paperwork to register part of my property as a smart home testing site. I set up a small IoT weather station in my backyard, hooked up to my home network, and documented it as part of my research into smart landscaping systems. With my tech zoning status secured, I hired a company to install a state-of-the-art security wall, 8 feet tall, made of sleek steel panels with built-in motion sensors, cameras, and a biometric lock gate. It wasn't cheap, $25,000 for the whole setup, but protecting my land was worth every cent. The wall enclosed the entire area the HOA had targeted, including my creek and wooded retreat. Bold red signs were mounted every 20 feet. Private property, smart security zone, no trespassing. The reaction was instant. I was still at work when Caroline called me, her voice shaking with rage. "Nathan, what is this monstrosity you've put up around your property?" she demanded. "A high-tech security wall without HOA approval? This is a blatant violation." I kept my tone calm, almost cheerful. "Actually, I've registered my land for tech research purposes. State law allows for advanced security measures to protect tech assets. I've got all the permits. Happy to send you the paperwork." I could practically hear her fuming through the phone. "This is a clear attempt to sabotage the community unity plan," she snapped. "I've always been passionate about smart home tech," I said, my voice dripping with mock sincerity. "This wall keeps my research safe from intruders, human or otherwise." She didn't buy it. "This wall is an eyesore and a safety hazard," she said. "The board will have it removed." "Good luck with that," I replied. "The law's on my side, and while you're at it, you might want to brush up on trespassing statutes, because I'll press charges if anyone from the HOA steps foot on my land again." She hung up, but I knew this was far from over. The next day, I got a cease and desist letter from the HOA's lawyer demanding I take down the wall. Jenna laughed when she saw it. "They're bluffing," she said. "Your tech zoning exemption is airtight. They've got nothing." We fired back with our own letter outlining the legal basis for the wall, my registered tech status, and a warning about HOA harassment. The HOA vote was set for a Friday evening, and I made sure everything was ready. The security wall was fully operational, its sensors humming quietly, cameras recording every inch of my property line. I'd even scheduled a smart home tech demo for the following weekend, inviting residents to come see my weather station and learn about IoT systems. It was a legitimate event. I'd hired a tech consultant to give a presentation, but it was also a strategic move to solidify my tech zoning claim. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. At the meeting, Carolyn presented the updated Community Unity Plan, but my property was noticeably absent from the map. She didn't mention the change, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. During the open comment period, I stood up, a smile on my face. "I'd like to invite everyone to my smart home tech demo next Saturday," I said. "The consultant will walk you through the benefits of IoT systems and how to stay safe around smart security setups. Feel free to come by. Just use the front gate. The security wall is for your protection." Caroline's face turned red, but she didn't say a word. A few neighbors actually seemed interested, jotting down the time in their calendars. What I didn't expect was the domino effect my move would spark. Within a week, 2 other homeowners whose properties were targeted by the plan reached out to me, asking about the tech zoning process. One was a freelance app developer who'd always wanted to test smart lighting systems. The other had a side gig designing home automation apps. Suddenly, Oak Ridge Estates had a small but growing tech hub movement with new security walls popping up around the neighborhood. The first incident with my wall happened about 10 days later. My cameras caught 2 HOA board members snooping around the perimeter, trying to disable the motion sensors. When they got too close, a loud alarm went off, and a pre-recorded message blared, "Warning, you are approaching a private security zone. Step back immediately." They bolted, but not before one of them tripped on a rock and fell flat on his face. My cameras got it all. The second incident was more serious. I came home one afternoon to find Caroline and a city inspector standing by my utility box, claiming to investigate safety violations with my security system. I showed the inspector my permits, and he confirmed everything was up to code before leaving. Caroline, on the other hand, didn't back down. "This isn't over, Nathan," she hissed. "That wall is a hazard, and the board will protect this community. It's legal, it's marked, and it's doing its job," I shot back. "If anyone from the HOA messes with it again, I'll sue for damages and harassment. Test me." The smart home demo went off without a hitch. About 15 neighbors showed up, genuinely curious about the tech. The consultant was great, explaining how IoT systems could save energy and improve security. A few kids even got a kick out of the weather station's live data display. I noticed Caroline parked down the street, watching from her car, but she didn't dare come closer. It felt like a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Over the next few months, things in Oak Ridge Estates started to shift. The two other homeowners who'd followed my lead with tech zoning put up their own security walls, and the HOA board began to fracture over the community unity plan. Several members started questioning the legality and fairness of repurposing private land, especially after the HOA's legal fees spiked from all the back and forth with me and the others. The tension came to a head at the quarterly meeting 3 months later. Attendance was higher than usual, with residents eager to see how the drama would play out. When Caroline tried to push forward with Phase 2 of the plan, targeting new properties now that the original ones were off limits, a board member named Sarah spoke up. "Before we move on, I propose we reassess the legal foundation of designating private land as shared space," she said firmly. "We've had valid concerns from homeowners, and our legal costs are through the roof because of this." Whispers of agreement spread through the room. Another board member seconded the motion. Caroline's face soured. "This plan is essential for elevating our community's status," she argued. "Every top-tier development has shared amenities." "Then why don't we focus on actual shared land?" a homeowner suggested. "The HOA owns that 2-acre lot by the entrance. It's just sitting there with the welcome sign. Why not develop that instead of taking pieces of our private property?" The idea caught on like wildfire. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to pause the community unity plan and form a committee to explore options using existing common areas. Caroline's influence took a nosedive after that. She stayed on as president until her term ended 5 months later, but she didn't get reelected. The new president, a former city planner named Robert, took a more balanced approach. He prioritized improving the HOA-owned land, like adding a playground and walking trails, while respecting private property boundaries. Robert also spearheaded a revision of the HOA covenant, clarifying that any use of private land for community purposes required explicit owner consent and fair market compensation. It was a bitter irony that Caroline's overreach had led to stronger protections for everyone in Oak Ridge Estates. As for me, I actually grew to love my little smart home testing site. The weather station turned out to be a fun hobby, and I started experimenting with other IoT gadgets like smart lights and sensors for my garden. I kept the security wall up. It had done its job in protecting my land, and now it genuinely kept my tech setup safe. Caroline eventually sold her house and moved to another development. Rumor had it one with a more progressive approach to community spaces. Good riddance. At the spring community picnic, held on the newly developed common area by the entrance, Robert came up to me with a smile, holding a cup of iced tea. "You know, your pushback against Caroline's land grab really shook things up around here," he said quietly. "That tech zoning move was genius." I grinned. "Just protecting what's mine while trying to be a good neighbor. Sometimes those two things go hand in hand." "They sure do," he agreed. "By the way, my son was wondering if you'd share some tips on setting up a smart thermostat. He loved your demo." "No problem," I laughed. Good neighbors get free tech advice. I'll swing by tomorrow. As I looked around at the picnic, families chatting, kids playing, everyone enjoying the actual common area, I felt a deep sense of peace. My high-tech security wall still stood tall around my property, a quiet reminder that sometimes the best way to be part of a community is to set clear boundaries first. And as for Caroline and her shared space dream, well, sometimes the best revenge is standing your ground, watching justice play out, and letting a few motion sensors make the point for you. Have you ever faced an HOA nightmare like this? What would you do? Share your story in the comments. If you believe in justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Blast off.